Topper the blue-nosed reindeer had a very human-like stance, and if you ever saw him, you would give a second glance. Then wonder, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the Drum Island arc in One Piece, and I'm so excited to dig in. I've actually really missed you all. It's been a couple of days since it's been a little while since I've talked to you, and I'm really excited to get back with you with this arc in particular. And yeah, if you want to know, let's think. Drum Island goes from chapter 130 to 155, and I'm about halfway through the arc. So I'm excited to kind of report back on what I've been thinking in terms of this first half. And yeah, anyhow, if you're new to my channel, then hello, welcome. I really love books and reading, and manga is kind of a new venture for me. And I really enjoy talking about it with quite a bit of passion and vigor and a little bit of chaos. So if you are really into that, I would encourage you to subscribe, like the video, stick around, and and I have a Patreon. So if you want to support me on there, I would encourage you to do so. And without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. I think I'm definitely going to be talking more in themes rather than in plot points. It just has worked out better for me in that way. And yeah, I mean, I kind of meander in and out of thought. I have some notes, and that's just how I'm going to tackle this arc. So we start off with Nami being really sick, and it's interesting because I didn't expect it to be a theme in the arc at all, or in this story, sickness, and it ends up being a lot bigger of a deal than I had ever anticipated. What's interesting though is that some of the characters, let me think, what characters? I have it written down somewhere. Oh yeah, Usopp, Sanji, and Luffy ask about sickness. They ask Princess Vivi about sickness and what it's like to be sick, and her response is like, "You've never been sick?" It's kind of shocking to me how, I don't know, like, everybody's been sick. It's interesting. It's just like the world of One Piece really is a world of its own in a lot of ways, because who at 18 or 19 or 17 has not been sick? I mean, you maybe don't remember being sick, but you've been sick. Maybe I'm stuck on this because I was just sick a few days ago, and it was wretched. We had the stomach bug in my house, and it was just not fun. And it's like, I don't know. So to have these, three young men talk about context of sickness, it was kind of interesting. And then I think Vivi's response would be like my response too. I'd be like, what? You've never been sick? I'm gonna stick with sickness. They get to Drum Island, and I think originally Luffy wants to threaten them or fight them into giving Nami medical care. And of course everybody except for the Whiskey Peak people are really on their guard whenever pirates arrive, and that is true for this town as well.
I can't find these jacket.
I'm constantly getting interrupted over here. So what was I saying? Luffy initially wants to fight the people of Drum Island, and it might have been Vivi, but I don't exactly remember. But someone was like, humility over threats, essentially. And I really love that. I thought that was really profound. I've thought about that a couple of times. What did I say? I said humility over something. Oh, when you don't organize your notes. Oh, it was humility over impulsiveness. So maybe Luffy wanted to he was just going with his instinct and, being demanding and not really thinking about it. And then, he ends up, please, can you help us? Our friend is sick. She's super sick. She's running a fever. And then these people of Drum Island, they say that they only have one doctor. And since all of these layers, all of this uncovering is really interesting because we don't really have a context of what medical care is like in One Piece. And so they say they have one doctor and she's a witch. And the whole thing really comes together kind of seamlessly because now we're getting kind of plotty. But before they actually reach Drum Island, they meet up with a band of pirates. We get to Wapol, or King Wapol, 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 I think. And like in his character design, like when Oda gives us a head to toe of a character and has their nameplate in front of him, he had eaten this sword. And I was like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? But he was like eating, he had just eaten a sword. And of course, Luffy takes care of it. And this is before they get to Drum Island. And I thought it was just going to be like a one-off, they just, like a filler moment that Wapol was just there. Oh, and it said that Wapol ate a fruit. What did he eat? No. Munch fruit. So he had eaten munch fruit. And he was like, I'm going to eat your boat. I'm going to eat everything. Like, he has the ability to just eat everything, whether it be what we consider edible or not. And, okay, so then fast forward. We are in this town. They say their only doctor is a witch. And I'm like, that is fascinating. I think that's super interesting. Like, I don't know, with this idea of like witch doctors and I don't know. There was just something about it that like tickled my interest. Like I was immediately fascinated by that. And we end up meeting her. She looks like Django's mother. Like she looks like a washed up rock star who birthed a washed up rock star. She just looks wild, and apparently she's 130 or 139, almost 140, and she really does have medical care, antibiotics and all of that kind of stuff. Like she is legit. And they kind of prove that when she comes down and she ends up healing a kid, like a child, and all she wants in return is sort of like practical things. But she ends up going anyway, so we meet her, but she wasn't able to give Nami medical care because Luffy had already decided that he was going to climb to her house or to her abode, which is this kingdom on top of a mountain. So he and Sanji set off, and Luffy is carrying Nami on his back. And she's fragile, she's running a fever, and I'll get into this a little bit further down the road, but I really enjoyed this Luffy not being able to fight. So, in terms of medical care, so we come to find out that Wapol is King Wapol, and he was the king of Drum Island. And he was really oppressive, and he really didn't care about his people. He didn't fight for his kingdom, that's what I wrote, and he abandoned his people. And what I love about it is we get to see Vivi's response, because she, as the princess of Alabasta, which she's trying to get back to so fiercely, she's like trying to get back to her people. She wants peace. She understands that there might be war there in Alabasta, and when she visits these other towns and she sees these other leaders, like she's aghast and frustrated and surprised at how they treat their own people. And I think in a lot of ways it reveals like just what a wonderful leader she is to her people. And also it shows just how wretched like Wapol is in his leading skills. And when he leaves, he doesn't defend his people. He leaves them, and he takes all the doctors with him, it seems. And that really just, oh, it got under my skin. I can't believe, I didn't know that I was going to have this reaction. It got under my skin. I was like, that's oppressive. I wrote that. I know I wrote that with like exclamation points. I was like, that's super oppressive. Like, how, why, how, what? You can be a bad leader. You can be terrible. But to not offer medical care to your people and to be selfish and to take them all with you is wretched, is terrible. So immediately I'm like, Walpole is awful and dangerous and I don't like him. And this poor town is left with a witch doctor who comes and goes as she pleases on a whim, and she's hard to get to and she's hard to access. And so I was like, that's just not right. That's just not right on like a human level, in terms of just basic care that people have a right to. So that really made me angry. And let's think. So yeah, and well, I'll go back to Luffy, having Nami on his back. So he is like trying to get Nami medical care, and he is working super hard at it. He's like climbing the mountain. He's fighting off like giant flesh-eating rabbits. And also, but he's not fighting them off because it's so funny because he can't really fight. So Sanji has to fight for Luffy in a lot of ways. And because if Luffy fights, like, all that impact on his body is going to go to Nami and she'll end up dying. And so it was really humorous and also incredibly sweet. Like, it was both, that Luffy is willing to work so hard not to jostle Nami around. Amid all of this, Wapol's back at Drum Island. It's being revealed like just how terrible he is. And as he's there, and as Luffy and Sanji and Nami are climbing the mountain, or Nami's really getting a ride to the mountain, or up the mountain to the witch's house, there's an avalanche. And oh boy, I mean, it's just like, it really sets Luffy back. And it's really cool to see like the drawing of the avalanche and like how it's just death and destruction all over the place. As the avalanche is coming down, Sanji uses his body to make sure that Nami doesn't get hurt, and in the process, Sanji gets hurt. So now Luffy has to take care of Sanji, and he has to take care of Nami, because he's not going to just leave Sanji in the snow, for her to die. And then also like sort of it's kind of happens like in behind the scenes, but there's like a rabbit and you see the hand, and there's this like baby rabbit, and the rabbits have been like chasing the Straw Hats to eat them, or to at least bite them. And so you see this little paw sticking up out of the snow after the avalanche, and Luffy takes the hand and pulls out a rabbit who was buried in the snow, and that rabbit reunites with the baby, and that was really, really, really sweet. And I just really liked that. So, then Luffy goes on this like immense journey in which he is like climbing up the side of a mountain to get to the castle so that his friends can get medical care. And he himself is like putting himself through brutal torture. Like, his fingers start bleeding, his toes start bleeding. He is not dressed. For the snow conditions. Although I thought it was really cute when some of the Straw Hats were wearing like puffers and parkas and stuff. But yeah, he climbs, he like puts his body in physical danger. At one point, Sanji drops down the mountain and he like catches him with his teeth. Luffy does. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he like continues to fight, and he makes it to the top of the mountain. And there he is able to get his friends medical care. Most notably Nami, who has a prehistoric infection because of the Little Garden Arc, which is, prehistoric island. She only caught it there I'm sure she caught it at the prehistoric island, and if she can't, Anyways, she caught a prehistoric disease at the Little Garden because it's a prehistoric island. I think I already said that. And the only solution is like 5 days of antibiotics. Otherwise, she would have been dead, like in a matter of 5 days. So they get there with 2 days to spare, thank goodness. And the witch doctor is fixing her up. And, the witch doctor says just how tough like Luffy and Sanji are, which is so great that other people see their potential. And yeah, like, I don't know, it's just the whole thing is like, yes, really exciting and really wonderful that they make it to the top of the mountain. Oh, one note about the witch, which plays into like what I'm going to say next. But the witch gets around on like a sleigh, and it kind of reminds me of Santa's sleigh. And I don't know if that's what Oda was going for, like Santa's sleigh, like a play on Santa's sleigh. And considering, like, you all tell me all the time how mindful Oda is of, you know, like folklore and fairy tales and twisted fairy tales and like plays on fairy tales or plays on old tales. And so I wonder if it had something to do with Santa, or old Saint Nicholas and like Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, because she gets around on like a sleigh, and it does look like, you know, like Santa's Christmas sleigh in the sky. So I thought that was very like whimsical. And as we're in this castle that is not very warm, the climate is cold. And so we're in this castle, and there is a reindeer. Sanji thinking only of food, and well, Luffy also only thinking of meat. They like chase down this reindeer because they want to eat it, and they like, the reindeer is like running around, and the reindeer's talking. And we find out the reindeer is named Chopper. Is that right, Chopper? Yes. So they're trying to eat sweet little Chopper, who's just so cute. He's a reindeer that stands up on 2 feet rather than on 4 feet, or like is, you know, on all fours. He's like standing upright, and Chopper can talk. And it says that Chopper ate the human fruit. And I was like, oh, I did not know that the devil fruit extends to other creatures. Like, this is wonderful. The world, again, has just grown. And then, and that Chopper is like, you know, he is trained with a medical background because he's been with the witch. And then we get Chopper's backstory. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So Chopper has a blue nose, and it is so much of like Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. Because of Rudolph's red nose, everybody laughs and makes fun of him. And then one night he's needed, and then it cheers on Rudolph. But Chopper doesn't have that kind of story. No, Chopper is made fun of, and he doesn't fit in, and even his parents reject him, and I cannot. That is just, no. Especially since Chopper's design is very cute, and I am a sucker for a cute design. So then Chopper decides that he's going to eat the human fruit, and that maybe he can be accepted in the human world. But yet again, he is rejected. So he's rejected twice over. And now he like stands upright, and he carries his wounds with him. And I was like, no. But then after like telling the backstory, you know who thinks it's super cool? Luffy. Like, Luffy's all about Chopper's weird backstory and like rejected backstory. And he like loves Chopper for who he is. And I was like, that is beautiful. It was so beautiful. It was so sweet. I am so excited. I want Chopper to join the Straw Hats. And even Luffy's like, you know, kind of like, please, can you join us? And so I really hope that Chopper finds belonging with the Straw Hats, because yes, it must happen, y'all. It must happen. So at this point, Nami's feeling better. We've met Chopper. You know, the future of Chopper's Chopper is really like hanging in the balance. So I don't really know what's going to happen there. King Wapol is still wreaking havoc in the town below, so I don't really know how that's gonna resolve yet. But here's some just random notes. So there was a whole thing as I'm dropping stuff. So there was a whole, like, at the beginning of this whole section, there was a note on all the seasons, and how there are a bunch of different seasons in the Grand Line, and so things can just dramatically change left, right, and everywhere. Things can just flip from hot to cold, cold to hot, freezing to summer days, or scorching temperatures, and that's just how it is on the Grand Line. So, you know, even in the last arc, it was sunny. I think it was like nice weather, pretty nice weather. Maybe it was super hot. I can't remember. But now we're in like freezing temperatures, and that explains all of that. So I liked that. There's also an SBS in which somebody asked about everyone's birthdays, and I believe Sanji's birthday is March 2nd, which is really close to my birthday. So I was like, oh, yes, almost birthday twins. I felt very excited about that. And I really liked that. Oh, I like the woolly hippo and King Wapul. I just wanted to slap him silly because he's like, get a move on. Are you still mad that I killed your brothers? And I was like, don't be mean to the woolly hippo, which I just find very cute. Very, very cute. Oh my gosh. Okay, so our cover story is about Django, and Axian Morgan comes in. And I was like, Axian Morgan and Django. I've not seen Axian Morgan in forever, and I was very excited to see him again. I did not know I would have such a reaction to Axian Morgan, but I was like, it's been a long time, and it's like seeing an old friend again. And even though it was just for a moment, it was a beautiful moment, and I was so excited. And then, we also see Kaya, Usopp's friend from his island, and she's training to be a doctor. And we see Usopp's little pirate friends, the little kids that were his like pirate crew, and they're like crew members for Kaya now. So I love that, or Kaya, I don't know. But I love that. That is just... So the cover stories are giving me a lot of joy. And then this kind of in like the last arc, when all of a sudden I'm like, where's Sanji? Like, where's Sanji? What has happened to him? He pops up and he ends up playing an integral role in the Little Garden arc. This time, Zoro goes for a swim and then pops up like 5 or 6 chapters later. And, Oda's consistent in reminding us that, like, Zoro has some battle wounds because he's got this scar across his chest and everything. But yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, Zoro, you haven't been around for, like, quite a while. And so it was good to see Zoro again, who had taken a freezing cold swim and is now, like, half naked, walking around in the snow. And I was like, oh my goodness. So the whole thing was just hilarious and wonderful and joyful, for me at least. Anyway, I think that's it. I think that's all of my notes. Oh, and then there was an ox fruit, but it kind of popped up in only one scene, and I didn't really get a good grip on what that was. It would look like somebody who can move rather quickly and had the bottom half of an ox, maybe? I don't know. I cannot... Is that it? Is that it? I think that is it from me. So I'm going to continue to read. Very excited as to where this is going to go. And I'm sure I will talk to y'all soon. Hey, so I finished Drum Island arc. And I'm like, I've been sitting here for like a full minute, not really sure where to start. So I guess I'll just starting sometimes is the hardest thing. So I think when I left off, I had met Chopper, and he had just met Dr. H. I think it's Hiriluk. Coop. Let me check. Oh, Hiriluk. Hiriluk. Okay, so it's kind of interesting because we're in and out of a lot of backstories, and actually I think that is one of Oda's strengths, is the backstory, and sometimes the backstory within the backstory, or multiple backstories kind of being told very close together, and so it's filling out the picture of what's happening right now. And it helps the reader get invested. It helped me get invested. So we had just went from Chopper's backstory in terms of him having a blue nose and feeling like an outcast, and then eating the human fruit. I can't remember now. But then eating one of the devil fruits and getting the power to become human. And actually, when Dr. H meets Chopper and he was like, oh, I would never shoot you. when that moment happened, it kind of confused me. Like I kept on going back and forth because Chopper as a human doesn't have antlers. It makes sense to me now, but as I was reading it, I didn't know if they were actually different creatures because he looks so human, you know? And I mean, like, there were signs that it was Chopper, but I had a moment where I was not confused, but I was doubting my own reading skills, as a way of saying it, because I wasn't sure if, like, this, the abominable snowman-esque creature was the same creature as Chopper. And so Chopper gets taken in by Dr. H. And Dr. H has this, like, bananas, like this bananas backstory. He's a total quack. So one of the themes is like doctoring, you know, and healing, you know, like actually coming to a place of like emotional healing as well as like physical healing. But Dr. H is like a quack and he kills people in his doctoring. And he tells this story that ends up being, you know, really pivotal, that this man had an incurable disease and, you know, he tried so long to get this disease cured and spent so much time and effort to try and find a cure for this disease. And then one day he like sees cherry blossoms, and the magnificence and beauty of the cherry blossoms are what healed him. And, you know, later on we find out that that man is Dr. H. And I know that cherry blossoms in Japan is a whole thing. Like, it's a whole thing. And actually, I've been to Japan during cherry blossom season when I was a young girl. I visited Japan with my grandparents. My grandmother was Japanese. She's no longer with us on this earth. And we went during cherry blossom season. And of course, as a child, I mean, I feel like so many adults at that time told me, like, when I was this child, to like see, like, look and remember the cherry blossoms, because people visit Japan at that time just to see this magnificent beauty. And then seeing pictures, it jars memories, like, or it conjures memories that I've had looking at the actual cherry blossoms. And it's a very short season in which these gorgeous pink flowers bloom. They're so beautiful. And actually what I remember is, like, on windy days, you know, the air would, like, as a child, you know, you would be looking at these trees, and on windy days, the petals would be blowing off of the trees, making, like, these, the petals sort of fly in the wind, and they were just these bright, beautiful, pale pink petals, like, swirling in the wind. And it's just magnificent. And there's so many cherry blossom trees in Japan that when they all bloom, and they all bloom kind of all at the same time, which is why it's a certain season, and they're just all so gorgeous that when you behold the cherry blossoms, they are breathtaking. They are breathtakingly beautiful. They take your breath away. They're so, I think it's not just like the magnificence of the tree, even though if you saw a single cherry blossom, wow, I'm going on and on. If you saw a single cherry blossom tree, it would be magnificent just to observe. But because there are so many, it's not only the beauty of the blooms on the tree, which in and of itself is gorgeous, like if you were to observe something at a small scale, but on a large scale, like, you look around and there are just a plethora of trees all around. And so it is something gorgeous to behold. So it is. And then I know that Japan is very proud of their cherry blossom trees. And I'm sure there's, like, history and meaning that I'm not even conveying to the Japanese culture about the cherry blossoms. So not only is it just, like, in and of itself a beautiful thing, but I'm sure there's, like, history, and there's history and story that goes just beyond what I'm sharing. So it was interesting that Dr. H, you know, and it's interesting that Oda chose cherry blossoms to be a pivotal part of this arc, because Dr. H sees it, and he really wants to bring, and it heals him, you know, it heals him. And it makes, you know, begs the question, like, did it actually heal him physically, or maybe did emotionally? And this is me, like, putting myself on, you know, impressing my ideas onto the story. or, you know, maybe the disease was never cured, but maybe he let go of the control of controlling this disease that he had, and he was more okay with it. So, like, emotionally, he was healed by seeing such beauty. So, he wants to bring cherry blossoms. Like, he wants to eventually have, like, a cure-all, like, you know, a fountain of youth almost, like a thing that would cure anything. He wants to create that, but he also wants to bring cherry blossoms to this snowy island because cherry blossoms bloom in spring. They're like this March, like around March, April kind of bloom usually. And Drum Island is like a forever winter island. And so essentially, like, cherry blossoms would never come to an all winter, like a forever winter island, you know. So, you know, so there's that. Yeah, and so I don't know, where do I go from here? So then he takes Chopper in, and Chopper is just like, you know, he really admires the doctor, and he like looks up to the doctor, and they end up staying together for a year. And the doctor even like shows the flag, and he was like, this flag means to, I think, like, never give up on your dreams. Let me check my notes. So after Dr. H tells the story that is actually his own story about seeing the cherry blossoms, he says that means there's no such thing as an incurable disease. No matter what anyone says, I will be the doctor that saves this country. That's why I'm hoisting a skull and crossbones against every disease there is. One of the most sweet, you know, one of the sweetest things about this story is the relationship between Chopper and Dr. H. Like, when they embrace, I mean, it was just so sweet. And their friendship and the way that he, like, in some ways adopted him into his care. And then, you know, Chopper's desire to be a doctor and only wanting to help Dr. H, right? So he, like, found the mushroom. There was, like, this story that there was, like, a cure-all through a mushroom, or that something that it was rumored that this mushroom could cure all. And then with my Freudian slip of kill, it was actually a deathly mushroom. So, but Chopper ends up finding that for Dr. H, and Dr. H is touched. And Dr. H also knows that he's going to die soon. And so in his way of knowing that he's going to die soon, he pushes Chopper away. He, like, forces him out. He doesn't want him around. He tells him to go. It's almost like, I'm going to hurt you now so that you won't hurt later type of principle. And, you know, that's really quite sad that, you know, that happened. But in what's interesting too is like sort of all these pieces are coming together. He says that he did it. He is able to bring cherry blossoms to the island. You know, he figured out the magic cure or potion thing. Like, a lot of things are going on with Dr. H. I'm attempting to remember Dr. H's death, but I think what happens is that Walpole wants to, like, eliminate, like, he wants to keep all the doctors for himself. He is being very greedy and selfish and a terrible leader because of that. And he wants to eliminate all the doctors on the island. And even though Dr. H is a bunk doctor, you know, he's still a doctor. And so he still wants to, Walpole still wants to eliminate Dr. H. And so sort of at the scene, like, Dr. H's, you know, death scene, he's already a dying man. He is in front of Walpole, and he says, like, obviously something, like, super significant, which is, a man only dies when he is forgotten. And that to me, I was like, immediately that reminded me of Beowulf, because that is exactly, that is when I first heard about this concept when I was in college. And it was like, when does a person actually die? And it's when he is completely forgotten. And so in some ways, like, literature, like, someone's life can continue on far into the future, you know, if there is something that immortalizes him, such as a thing like literature. So, you know, it's, you know, so that, like, we're still reading Beowulf. Hundreds of years later, we're still reading Beowulf. And so, in some ways, Beowulf is immortalized because he is still not forgotten here in the year of 2024, because we're still reading about him. And so, it's like Dr. H, he's like, he says this thing, and immediately I connect it with like literature. And I'm like, wow, like that's so true in a lot of ways. Like even though his earthly life, his physical body might not be here anymore, the spirit for which he carried with him, for what he sort of impressed into the world, for as long as that impression stays, he will essentially still be alive. So significant, and really kind of a nod to, at least to me, to like ancient literature, which you'll see these concepts in, I think, quite often. Yeah, and it was fascinating to see that. So I was really like kind of excited. I don't know, that part really I enjoyed. I was like, oh, clever. I wouldn't be surprised if Dalton, who is, I don't know, like a high officer for Walpole, but kind of not at the same time. Like, you get the sense that Dalton is a good guy, and then you kind of get his backstory, but there isn't a lot. Like, to me, I don't know, he's like a key figure, but he doesn't play a pivotal role, weirdly. So Dalton, so we get these sort of backstories, and at one point there is a round table of leaders, and Princess Vivi is very, very tiny. She's like 10 years old, and she ends up like conducting herself with such grace. And even so, in Dalton's mind, when he sees her and he observes her, he said, what an amazing girl. I think Walpole like accidentally hits her in the face or something, and she's like, it's fine. And anyways, he's like, what an amazing girl. At a council of world leaders such as that, the slightest provocation could start a war. So any kind of offense could really spark something. Knowing that she controlled her anger, such political shrewdness is surprising in one so young. I'm humbled. And then later on in that same panel, or in that same page, he says, in Alabasta, a child of 10 puts the welfare of her country far above her own feelings. And, it's really it's such a beautiful contrast to Walpole, who's just like angry and eating things all the time, which is very unbecoming. And like he's like a hoarder of supplies, and he's very much like a gatekeeper. And you see these themes that Oda really loves to put in over and over. It's like selfishness versus selflessness. When like conducting oneself with grace and poise versus like being sort of brute and like off the rails in a lot of ways. And boy, I mean, Walpole is just like, he's eating everything and transforming, which was such a weird moment, and he's just a hot mess express. Before I get to the final battle, which is Coos Bananas Crazy's off the rails wild craziness, I do want to talk about Chopper and the way that he sees himself. To me, it's like a total flip on the Frankenstein type character, because so Chopper is almost like a Frankenstein's creature, almost, because the way he sees himself is an outcast to society, which he is. He's had lived experience of that, and he doesn't know where he fits, and he is just trying to find his way in the world, knowing that Chopper himself is very, very different. And the only person, unlike Dr. Frankenstein, because Victor Frankenstein is a prig, he's terrible. Unlike Dr. Frankenstein, you have Dr. H, who accepts Chopper for who he is and embraces him, and shows him in a lot of ways what love is. And in a lot of ways, it's parental love. It's the parental love that Dr. Frankenstein lacks for his own creature. And so it's very beautiful, in my opinion. And so you see their love and their friendship grow, and the sacrifices they make for one another. And even they're like, I really love the panel when they embrace Dr. H and Chopper. They embrace. It was so sweet. Part of the arc is trying to change the way that Chopper sees himself. And that's hard when you have been rejected your whole life. And eventually, it's like Luffy's like, you're so cool. Yeah, you're like a reindeer man who can transform. Like, that's so cool. And then it's even revealed that Chopper can transform into 7 different transformations, ranging from reindeer to human. And, Luffy loves that. He's like, that's amazing. And so Luffy really accepts Chopper for who he is and all of who he is, not just a part of him. And I think that gets Chopper's wheels spinning. Like, it starts turning and wondering. I think he starts to question the way that he feels about himself. And then you see Sanji and Sanji and Chopper are having this really kind of quick exchange. And Sanji's like, oh yeah, Luffy, he's made of rubber. And Chopper's like, what? Huh? And Sanji's like, he's basically a monster, but he says it with this grin on his face, and he's just so happy and thrilled that it's a monster, but in a good way. Like, that's so cool. It's almost like when they were celebrating that they are now being wanted by the Marines. They're like, our wanted posters are out there. That's awesome. Like, how many berries are you worth? It's this celebratory thing. It's like they're making their mark on the world. And so when Sanji's like, he's basically a monster, and he's smiling and he's doing it in this accepting and jovial way, again, I think you see Chopper's wheels turning, trying to, like, maybe being a monster isn't a bad thing. And I really love that. And it was, it's like changing the perception that you have for yourself and how hard that can be. But also when you see others who maybe have a similar experience, they live outside of being normal, or whatever that means, being socially accepted, and the way that they deal and manage that helps sometimes the person observing that deal and manage their own perceptions about themselves and being outside of society's standards in a way. So Dalton is like buried in snow and he's dying, and what's interesting is that all the doctors are hovering around, and they are like, one quack doctor taught us to never give up hope. We should listen to fools like that more. I was like, that's so beautiful. Like, it's so beautiful. It's like, I don't know, with great foolishness also comes like this, like, warming into one's heart. It was just it's so wonderful. So Dr. H, even though he didn't accomplish a lot, like, he killed his own patients, he was really good at changing how people thought, which is really cool. All right, the final battle. The final battle is like so off the rails. So Walpole ends up what's crazy about his power is that he can eat a bunch of stuff. And then he like transforms with the things that he ate, which is just nuts. And then he has his two henchmen, and he ends up eating the henchmen. They turn into Chess Marimio. It's just like, it looks like they're piggybacking on one another. I just hands down to Oda's creativeness, but his creative brain is like in some ways so stinking absurd. Like, I would have never thought about not only that you would eat something and then use that to transform yourself into a thing that ends up being destructive, but you can also eat others and then transform them into something different. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that is just nuts. And of course, when we first meet Walpole, he's a pirate, but he's not really a pirate because of course Luffy has a lot to say as he's learning more about what pirates are. And he says to them, you're a bunch of frauds. You pretended to be pirates, but you weren't willing to risk your lives. You don't know the meaning of this flag. And what I loved about that is that the idea of fraud, the idea of a fake is really coming through in this theme because, you know, you have Dr. H. He's a bunk doctor. He's a fraud of a doctor. He's not a real doctor. And yet he succeeds at other things. And then you see another fraud, a different kind of fraud, Wapol and his men, who aren't real pirates because pirates are not what he is, you know. The whole thing was just wonderful. And then I was going to tell you, I forgot. Oh my gosh. I was like, it's going to come back to me as I go through my notes. I'm sure it will. But it says, so Luffy's up there by the flag and he, you know, cause he's like, you know, you don't know the meaning of this flag and it's the flag of this flag and all that stuff. And then the men at the bottom, you know, Wapol and his men, they're like, the meaning of that flag you say? And then Wapol says, "Mwahaha, there's no meaning to that stupid pirate rag." And then he tries to shoot at it and he thinks he got it, but then what do you know, he just shot at like the pole holding the flag, but also Luffy's holding the flag, so he's still holding it in place even though the pole is now missing. And Luffy's looking a little busted, and he says, "See, it's unbreakable." But I was thinking that Wapol's saying that flag has no meaning. It's just a stupid pirate rag is such a great metaphor for the actual whole of One Piece. Because I think that so many people and you all have told me this, you all are the ones that said it first, but it's like people look at like this cartoony looking childish thing and they're like, oh, that thing can't have a lot of meaning to it. That thing is shallow. That thing isn't going to go anywhere. The whole like One Piece thing. And then you get in it and it means I'm getting so excited. Oh, and I forgot to turn on my lights. Okay, it's okay. I'll turn them on in just a second. I'm a mess. Okay, but then you get into it and you realize it's not just a stupid pirate rag. It's not just a childish story. There's so much more meaning. There's so much more joy and brightness and excitement and life in this than so many other things out there that you are really missing out if you just pass it off as something that is not worth your time. You are the one that's missing out because I wouldn't say that One Piece is unbreakable, but like Luffy said about the flag, it has more meaning than just looking at it like a stupid pirate rag. Because it's not. It means something. Just like One Piece, people really underestimate it, and when you really look at it, it's worth everything, all the things, the stuff. Yes. So not only does Wapol can he eat things and transform it himself, but he can like also eat himself, which is wild. Like at one point he's like chasing Nami and Nami's like running away from him, and all of a sudden he like eats his own self, and it's like the bizarreness of this world is unparalleled to anything else I've ever read. I mean, it is just nuts. And then, of course, you know, Oda's so good about just bringing it all in. Like Luffy and Wapol are fighting, and he says, "I don't care if you're a king or not. There are things that matter more than power," which is so true. I mean, we all know this, but it's just such a good reminder. And actually, like, just, oh, yeah. People who seek power, just, woo. So the fight goes down, and Luffy wins and all of that. And then, you know, we see Dr. K, the very old woman. She Dr. K, she ends up shooting off like this cannon, and it was Dr. H's, you know, final, I don't know, not symbol, but like the thing that he is contributing. Like when he was trying to get cherry blossoms to bloom on Drum Island, he had said he finally found it, and you know, he gave that concoction to Dr. K, and so she ends up firing it in the air, and then what happens is that it creates like these pink like snowflakes. So it is like, it's this magical moment of like pink snowflakes on this white island, and he is able to in a lot of ways get the sentiment, the idea of cherry blossoms blooming you know, all over, and you know, and so it's really, you know, it's like it brings it back home, like he was able to accomplish his goal, and it gives everything a really magical feel to it all. Dalton ends up surviving, and you get the sense that he's going to be the next leader of Drum Island, and he's going to lead well, and like be a fair ruler to this island. It's just like everyone can start over. Everyone has this opportunity to try again now that Waffle's gone and his men are gone. And it's kind of like, Luffy and his Straw Hat crew save the day, which, I like happy endings. So that's always really cool. And then they realized that a few days prior that there was somebody looking for Luffy, and he called himself Ace. So this, like, on chapter 154, it's very, like, setting up for the next arc, which is fine. It's just not my favorite kind of read, because then it gives you a lot of questions to mull over, and that's just sometimes not my favorite, because I don't know. It's just, like, a lot of teasing out, which is fine. But so I was like, okay, so we're not getting any answers about Ace right now. We're just knowing that he's there. And then Dr. K, she was like, have you ever heard of Gol D. Roger? Kind of like Monkey D. Luffy. So I'm like, what? And then I think Dalton's the one that says, you mean Gold Roger? And then she's like, oh, is that what they're calling him now? And I was like, what? Does Roger have a bunch of identities? Oh my goodness. And then even Dr. K, she's like, so the D will live on. So the will of the D lives on. The will of the D lives on. I didn't catch that. Oh my goodness. Maybe D is like a spirit thing. I don't know. Maybe it went from Gold D. Roger and it got passed on to Monkey D. Luffy. I don't know. But as they're sailing away, Chopper is now one of the Straw Hats, which is amazing. And it's such a great addition to the crew because he's a doctor and he has all these transformations and he's very cute and sweet. And I think he adds, like, personality-wise, he adds kind of like this sweet kind of meekness to the crew that I'm like, the only other person that's kind of like that is maybe Usopp, but not meek, just not the most confident person. So, you get someone that's kind of like got a sweetness to them. My camera battery died. How rude. So we also meet Mr. 2 of Baroque Works, Mr. 2 Bon Clay. So, there's that. And then we go back to Sir Crocodile and Miss All Sunday. So, and we're sailing onwards to Alabasta. So, it's just like all the pieces to set up for the next arc. But as always, I really love that it all kind of comes around and he's like, don't forget, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Like there are other Otis, like there are other villains out there. Don't forget. And Miss All Sunday is still out there and Sir Crocodile is still out there and we still have Baroque Works. And there's more going on than just, Wapol, who you just met and is now not a problem anymore. So, yeah, I like this arc. I really like this arc. I thought it was just so good, so sweet. I think of the arcs, this is more of like one of the sweeter ones. I found the last arc, the Little Garden arc, I don't know why that arc really touched me, like the profoundness of the layers in terms of like, of the layers of the heart and not messing with someone else, like sticking to your own business, but also like fighting for honor and friendship and what that means. And I liked this was really, really good too, but this one leaned more on like the sweeter side. And I'm so glad that Chopper has joined the crew. They have a doctor now, and Nami is no longer sick, or she's healing rather. And, it was just so good. It's so good. So onward to the next arc, which I think is very long. I think it's like 63 chapters. So, you might not see me in One Piece. We might not see each other. Well, I'm going to be reading One Piece. Maybe I'll try and update little updates in like vlogs because I'm trying to do a few more reading vlogs. So maybe I'll kind of like update how I'm feeling in those vlogs along with other things. But yeah, I'm loving this. It's so just wonderful. It's so wonderful and sweet and kind and has such great message. It has such a great message. I just am really loving it. So yeah, I'm gonna stop gushing. Um, yeah, I don't know what to think of Ace, but I think he probably plays a big character later on. And I don't know. I guess onward to the next island. Anyhow, well, that's it for me. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with me. I just ever so appreciate it. So much. Yeah, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward into the valley of death.